Wow, it's so beautiful up here on top of Norwich Castle. A big Norman building. And look, over there, a big Anglian building.
I'm so glad that we came to Norwich. A fine city.
A fine city.
Wow, why don't you go inspect the Morrisons over there? I need to go talk to Aaron about something.
I think I went to that Ket's Hill once.
Yeah, so what do you want to talk to me about, Olivia?
Oh yeah, come stand over here by these crenellations.
Yeah.
Me and Joe, we really treasure you as, a friend. We really enjoy doing the podcast with you, but, I don't know, it's just, it requires a level of sincerity that, I don't really feel like I can really embody anymore. You're a sincere guy, but, me and Joe, we don't really take things seriously, so we're gonna move to New York and, just kind of make the podcast into, unscripted social commentary, I think.
Wow, cloud.
Thanks for telling me. I understand. By the way, I just wanted to, while we're up here, you might have to crane your neck out a bit, but look at the spire of Norwich Cathedral. Isn't it beautiful?
Oh yeah, that is beautiful. But yeah, we already have our first few episodes planned out. We're gonna do one about traditional femininity. We're gonna try to launch our careers as actresses, socialites. We're probably gonna get addicted to research chemicals. Anyways, should we go back downstairs?
Maybe I will.
Where am I?
Why there, maiden? You find yourself on the field of Hastings, 1066. I say, a Norman. Hanaji, sir.
No! If only I understood the reasons for this conflict.
I just hate French people.
Now brimming wine in lordly cups seem to shine before each eager guest, and silence fills the crowded hall, as deep as when the herald's call thrills in the loyal breast. Let heaven over it hereafter.
Welcome back to the Weird Medieval Guys podcast. It's so great to be back in the saddle podcasting again after a long, restorative, refreshing, peaceful, relaxing, warm, sunny, slightly booze-tinged summer holiday. We had fun, but it's time to get back down to brass tacks. So joining me for our first episode back from the summer I should actually introduce myself. So in case you've forgotten all the time we've been gone, I'm Olivia, and this is Aaron. And we are also joined today by a very special guest who you may already be familiar with. That's one Mr. Joe Mason.
Good evening. The days are getting shorter. The temperature is getting lower. All the trees are dying.
Yay, seasonal depression.
History. Yeah.
And we are coming back in style with a pretty ambitious undertaking, maybe our most ambitious undertaking to date.
We might die.
We might go mad. We might fall out with each other, and you will be there to witness all of it as we spend a as of yet undecided number of episodes exploring the Norman Conquest.
I already punched Aaron in the head once.
Yeah. You didn't see this in fucking The Beatles Get Back by Peter Jackson.
The Weird Medieval Guys Get Back.
That's right, we're back. We are so back. And the thing about the Norman Conquest is that it is obviously a huge hinge point in the history of the entire British Isles, not just of England. It also is one of the most heavily mythologized moments in all of European history. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be separating the fact from the fiction and trying to understand how we got here, why this moment in 1066 that we're generally all familiar with was so important for so many different societies and in many ways shaped the modern nations of England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland in ways that we're still dealing with today.
So big it got its own tapestry.
That's right. What other events got their own tapestry?
Name one.
Exactly.
Cowards.
So we are going to be starting with a pretty long run-up, starting about 600 years before the actual events of the conquest, and I think that's because we want to give this absolutely massive event in English history kind of the context that it is owed, because it comes after a very long and interesting period of history in the British Isles, and a period where the kind of political and social and cultural situation is almost constantly changing. And I think when we were discussing how to go about making this episode, it felt like actually just starting sort of in media res was almost like not doing this event justice. Because even though the Norman Conquest and William's assumption of the English throne brought about massive change in almost every aspect of English society, I think there's often a tendency to put an emphasis on this event as being like extremely singular, sort of almost unprecedented. This kind of event where one foreign intruder comes in and just kind of takes over one state, kind of like swallows it. I think the metaphor I put in the notes was like a python in the jungle swallowing a warthog, kind of just like completely subsuming it. And in the jungle, that's something that can happen, but we're not in the jungle. We are in England, both sort of topically and physically in the room right now. And so that sort of simplification, I think, obscures the actual interesting story behind this event.
Yeah, because, in 1066, we have these three great characters who we will meet in due course, fighting over the English crown. But what is the English crown, and how did it come to be, and how inevitable was the creation of England itself? Right up until 1066 are the questions that we want to explore today.
Yeah. We have our cast of characters of the snake-like William the Conqueror, the warthog-like Harold Godwinson, and the Swedish-like Harold Hardrada.
That's all the animals you meet in the jungle.
If you meet a Swede in the jungle, you must kill him.
Well, it's an intrusive species.
Exactly. It's bringing imbalance to the ecosystem.
All right, tell them about Roman Britain.
Right, so very fortunately, because we have to start somewhere, we have a very convenient periodization to start with, because you have the turn from late antiquity into the early medieval period. Right now, it's the 5th century BC. It's the 5th century. No, it's not. And it's not right now either. I've not fallen through time. It's the 5th century AD. The Huns are moving off the eastern steppe and pillaging large parts of like the Eastern Roman Empire. There's all these huge population movements encouraged by that, where you get the Germanic migrations of the Goths and the Vandals. The Roman Empire is not having a good time of it. And worst of all, in Britain, they're doing one better. They're just leaving. They've given up. They're like, it's not worth it anymore. It's wet. They woke up in a steaming mood because they live in a shithole. They decided to go home. So, and with that point, it's an important point to make that pretty much as soon as the Romans leave Britain, writing stops happening. So you have to understand when studying this period that there's an extreme paucity of sources. So much of what we're talking about is based on archaeological and genealogical evidence, as well as like quite in-depth reading of those texts that are available to us.
Of which there are basically two.
Yeah, of which there are two, which makes your life a lot easier, really.
Well, it's not, and then it makes it harder again because both of those sources lie all the time.
Yeah, you could read every source available on this matter.
Yeah, I mean, there's two sources, which is number one, Gildas, who's writing 100 years later, who is just using this period as a way to like vindicate all of his political arguments.
All-time hater.
Yeah. Gildas is a 6th century Romano-British writer who basically writes down a history of Britain where he's just like, here's a list of guys who ruined everything.
I think he often he likes terms such as the wretched Britons.
Yeah.
And that ignominious race. Who keep betraying their worthy Roman and very importantly Christian rulers to sort of fuck around with the Picts and then get trashed and then say, oh no, I got hit. Please, Mr. Roman, can you bail me out? Yeah.
So our second source for the period is Bede, who basically just copies Gildas's homework and then adds a bunch of other things that are wrong.
Copies his homework and gets it wrong.
Yeah. And we know this because he adds a bunch of etymologies for place names that are just wrong. So he's like, so the Isle of Wight is named after a guy called White. It's not.
It's named after spooky ghosts, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
like Tolkien.
Like Tolkien.
Everything's like my favorite book.
Yeah, he's hanging around in the background. Tolkien may get mentioned.
Yeah, he will come up. So Gildas and Bede is writing centuries after Gildas.
Yeah, Bede is writing in the 8th century, and he's also Northumbrian, so he's got kind of like a bit of regional bias, because you know what the Northumbrians are like. One more source that does mention this time period, but is generally regarded as being pretty useless for purposes of actually studying the period, what will come in handy much later, is the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. So this is a chronicle that was compiled during the 9th century, during the reign of King Alfred. So that's even later than Bede. And is also, surprise, surprise, regarded as being pretty unreliable. So we have sources that do not accurately particularly relate events. That's basically one of the only things we can say with certainty about all of these sources, is that we have instances in all of them where they're quite provably wrong. And so that leaves us to fill in the gaps, to compare different accounts, to infer what we can from the way that these people told their stories.
And also to consult the archaeological record.
Yes.
Who would do such a thing?
If you were so inclined. But which obviously presents its own problems. Sadly, people didn't like to write their names and what they were doing on like their pottery.
Yeah. Sometimes they're swords, though.
Sometimes they're but you know, it's like more like I'm sick.
Yeah.
I use this to kill folks. And I'm like, wow, we finally know what these big long metal objects are for. And also genealogical records, but as a humanity, as a subject of the humanities, we all hate science.
Yeah.
Yeah, and scientists keep bursting in and be like, don't worry, we've found a solid interpretation of what happened. This is 100% what occurred. And then everyone boos them. They're like, get out, nerds.
Scientists come in and they're like, we swabbed the cheek of every Welshman. And we're here to tell you. They're the true inheritors of Rome.
Yeah, they are.
There should be a Welsh Pope in Rome.
No, the papacy should be moved to Aberystwyth.
Yeah.
To St. David's, thank you very much.
Okay.
So, the important thing to remember about Roman Britain is that there is nothing that we would appreciably call English about Roman Britain. There is the native population of Celtic people who speak a sort of constellation of regional Celtic dialects that are probably distantly related to modern-day Irish and Welsh and Cornish. And then there are the sort of the elite who are either Romans who've come from other parts of the empire or are local people who've sort of integrated into Roman culture and like having Roman stuff. They love importing Tuscan jugs.
Yeah, quite late in the development of villas, but they really get going just as things are about to fall to pieces.
So the Roman army leaves, and pretty much immediately, as far as we can tell, the Roman sort of architecture of government that had sort of administered the province also disintegrates.
Yeah. And the traditional interpretation of this is that the Roman army was keeping away all these scary northerners of the Picts, the Scots, and, of course, the Jutes, the Angles, and the Saxons, who then come through, trash everything that's nice, and sort of reduce England to a post-apocalyptic land of guys scraping around in mud.
Yeah.
Like you see on all the TV shows where everything's just covered in shit.
Yeah.
You do have this kind of what seems to be an abrupt transition where Britain goes from somewhere where, as far as we know, I think there were sort of native British elites who were quite well integrated within Roman society. It seems that Roman customs were adopted, so they were, minting coins and building like garden follies and villas and fountains and stuff.
And cities.
And cities, such as one Londinium. And as far as we know, or, the way that it appears, that stuff stopped happening quite quickly.
The abandonment of Roman material culture is incredibly rapid, as evidenced through the archaeological record, where the current theories are that they basically entirely stop producing pottery. They lose the ability to make metalwork, glasswork, lead. They go back to making planks with axes instead of saws. What many could perceive as like a real step backwards civilizationally. But more recently, there's a bit of contestation on the period of the idea that it was destroyed. It wasn't that the Saxons and the Angles came along and just burnt everything to the ground and were content to live in mud and shit. And it's more of a case of like Roman society and Roman material like culture was quite reliant on these quite complex trade systems. Like, as part of the Roman Empire, Roman Britain was integrated with the rest of the Roman world, which means that, like, you can get pottery made on the Rhine, you can get Samian ware if you're lucky and rich, you know, all this stuff. And also, you can make a surplus. You can be a rich guy by taking part in this trade. You can be part of the Roman state apparatus. So you could be a soldier or a governor, and then that means that you have the money to, say, buy fancy goods and, you know, have nice metalwork made and, like, have nice glass pottery.
Or you can export things like tin.
Which is
a major British export.
Tin and hides. Hides is a big one.
Salt.
But all of these things are reliant on being incorporated into this larger world. So once Roman Britain is cut off from that world, like, these, like, sort of higher elites seem to sort of fade away because they're no longer, like, have an ability to sustain themselves. There's no longer if the Roman government has withdrawn, you can't be part of that state apparatus anymore.
Yeah.
Same with the Roman army, and if you were a merchant or someone who made your money off, like, servicing those people, or if you were a potter or a metal worker who sold to these, like, sort of Roman elites or British Roman elites, like, you no longer could make money, so a lot of people were just going back to farming. And this is somewhat backed up by the archaeological record that there aren't signs of, like, mass violence during the period. What you'd expect, and what we see during the Roman conquest of Britain, is you get mass graves, as, you know, guys turn up and kill loads of people, and then you just dump them all in the pit. And you also, if you're going by Gildas and Bede's account, who talk about the sacking of various Roman towns and cities, which is what leads them to be in, like, such a state, like, destruction layers, you'd expect to find basically, like, a big pile of ash and smashed pots where, like, these hairy barbarians turned up and ruined everything. That is not present. So a more convincing argument is that being separated from this more complicated, sort of economic system, there were less pressures to continue living with this certain lifestyle, and it was becoming harder to do so. So a lot of farmers, like, it was a period of intense dislocation for those elites who were pretty Romanized, but most farmers were okay with going back to, like, a more, like, a less complex lifestyle. This often wasn't, like, a worse way of living. They had replacements. It's not like people were just carrying around grain in their hands and dropping on the floor and be like, oh no. They were just making do with what they could make locally, less complex things. You can use a hide bag instead of an amphora, you know, and, like, because you don't have this pressure to produce additional agricultural surplus to feed all the people who are part of the Roman state who don't feed themselves. They need someone else to produce food for them. You're like, well, I just don't need to engage with this anymore.
Yeah.
And, like, at the same time, you see signs of, like, a huge amount of migration into the British lowlands. So we know that...
So places like southern England.
Yeah, southern England. We know that it wasn't violent, necessarily, or wasn't as violent as we've been told. Presumably, you know, there's always violence, like that sort of... I'm not going to make a commentary on endemic violence in the medieval period.
Or alternatively,
society.
other histories of settlement in supposedly empty regions.
Yeah. But we do have a lot of evidence of communities living alongside of each other, interbreeding. There's cemeteries where you get quite a mix of different genealogies, and it's not simply from the north. It's not just Angles, Saxons and Jutes. You also get signs of Irish migration, people coming over from Francia, people coming over from Wales and coming from, like, the periphery of northern England, and are more interested in maybe moving towards this more fertile area and coming in perhaps less violently than previously imagined to take advantage of, like, the sort of opportunities to the opportunities that are presented by this sort of, like, fertile land, which is seeing less economic pressure to overproduce. You're not and obviously in the case of the people who are coming over from, like, northern Europe, you know there is an opportunity for a better quality of life.
You have much better soil quality in southern England than you have in, like, Ireland or Scotland or Scandinavia or I mean, lots of places.
And there's not a guy there being like, and you gotta fucking work for me.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, you have this almost kind of, at least for like, one of the interesting things, and I think we talked about this before when we did the episode about how the English language evolved, but one of the interesting things is the first century of settlement after the Romans withdraw, you don't see any kind of evidence in burials or in sort of in buildings of like very strong social hierarchies. These are not kingdoms that are moving over. These are, I mean, I hate to, it's hack to say it, but I think there's an interesting comparison with like the American West, or the idea of the American West, where it's like, hey, there's this ludicrously fertile, fairly peaceful, sparsely populated area. Let's all move in there, be independent homesteaders, and make a killing. And actually, coming back to the point about, you know, the great simplification of the English economy, like, you can make a good living as a subsistence farmer under those circumstances.
I think it's a lot like those people on the internet who say, like, well, I may have a spreadsheet job now, but in the communist, in the commune...
Under my preferred ideological
I will be
system.
a flower gardener who
Yeah.
teaches interpretive dance. And it's like,
Yeah.
just because the spreadsheet is what drives, like, modern conveniences and systems of, like, consumption doesn't mean that it's something that people would necessarily choose individually for themselves to enforce.
But there is an interesting transition here, which complicates this quite rosy view, which is we have signs for migration all over. You have the Romano-British and just the British people, like you said, speaking like constellation of Celtic languages. But in a couple of 100 years, you see a homogenization, like fairly rapidly towards, and this is a contested term, but sort of Anglo culture, Angle culture,
Yes.
and Saxon, both material culture. You start seeing works like made in that specific style, which is something we can identify through the finds. And Saxon culture seems to become predominant, hence why it ends up getting called England and not like Ireland too,
Yeah.
or Roman Brit.
Yeah, wait, I think we need to also
We should
yeah,
unpack...
The main thing I just wanted to touch on was to make sure people know that when we talk about Angles and Saxons and Jutes, broadly what we're referring to is people from, like, what we would consider to be modern day sort of Denmark, like northern Germany. But we don't actually know who all was coming over. We know some of these people were involved. There were probably lots of other different people. Predominantly, they probably were from Northern Europe and spoke Germanic languages.
We have a whole episode about it.
We had a whole episode about that.
And that consolidation of material culture behind something that seems a bit more recognizably Germanic and a bit more homogenous coincides with a major political shift, which is the emergence of initially quite small scale petty kingdoms. This happens starts happening, at least as far as we can tell, in like the mid 6th century. There are a lot of theories about why this happens, but my personal favorite is basically the ecological crisis of the mid 6th century, where there were a bunch of volcanoes went off and it just sort of destroyed Europe for 50 years. The sun didn't exist for a bit. It was, according to some historians, the worst period to be alive in all human history. We talked about this. Yeah, we talked about this in like the last Vikings episode that we did.
Why are they so emo?
Yeah, like the Vikings just stopped worshiping the sun forever because it went away.
Yeah, man. Ain't loyal, man.
Yeah, exactly. But we don't know for sure. There are lots of little clues, and the timeline makes a lot of sense. But what we do know is that political things that are recognizable as petty kingdoms, small states, are starting to emerge, and political hierarchies are starting to emerge at around about the same time that culture is becoming more homogenized and more Germanic.
And like that process, I mean, I'm in favour of this purely because I like the name, is possibly theorised as a sort of FA Cup system.
Explain that for our non-UK listeners.
Where, just like you play in your local league and whoever did the best there goes on to the big leagues.
Yeah.
You and your 10 pals go around beating up all the other guys who know 10 guys in your local village until you gotta be like, okay, I'm king of the village. Now we go fight the guy in the next village over.
So
and all those other
hypothetically,
villages.
The king of Grimsby could go and fight the king of Manchester.
Well, it would have existed, you fool. Grimsby's a Viking settlement.
Spoilers!
As evidence.
Who are the Vikings? I don't know this. We're in media res.
You the king of like Stratthorpe.
Well, I think isn't it that anywhere that ends with ing is like an Anglo-Saxon place name that just meant this guy and his people.
Yeah.
So like Reading is like Rayada's people.
Yes.
Hastings is like, Harry's people or whatever, Herbert's people.
Only Forbes's town, I
Yeah.
think, or the woods. Anyway, so
Cultural permeability.
you beat up all the local guys. You slowly snowball on the back of that, where all of a sudden, like, you're not just 10 guys from the village anymore. You're like 2,000 guys, and you're going over to the next petty kingdom.
2,000
conquer them.
guys FC.
Yeah. And like, if you're not part of this process, you're gonna get rolled up on it, because
Yeah.
previously, like, yeah, sure, you could chase guys off with sticks, but now there's like 2,000s of those guys, and they have a so-called kingdom that you kind of have to pay like fucking taxes to. Once again, the state has returned and ruined the libertarian utopia of post-Roman Britain.
All right. And there's another process that happens about the same time as the Germanification and the consolidation of political power, which is
Christianization.
yes, because the Roman Empire had brought Christianity to Britain, but it had brought it very specifically to the British. These whatever you want to call them, Anglo-Saxons, Germanic peoples, whatever, arrive, and they are definitively not Christian. We know sweet F all about what they did believe, because Bede chose not to write it down, although he did say they have a really fucked up calendar.
Yeah. They probably like pigs.
They probably did like pigs.
I like pigs. To be
Who
fair.
doesn't like
Cool.
pigs?
Put a little pig on your helmet.
Yeah.
Yeah, get
think
buried
that-
in a big mound.
Like a pig.
We're veering so dangerously close.
This is a known thing. Like, this is the only thing I know. I know 2 things about Anglo-Saxon religion. 3 things, which is you can make up that it's just like Viking religion.
Yeah, Woden.
Will not be mentioned in this episode. Or you can, they had a little hole in their house and you'd trap a ghost in it. Because ghosts would be trying to break into your house all the time.
Yeah.
So you'd have like 2 holes on either side, so they just flow through one hole and straight out the other.
Oh, nice.
But that's unverified, so maybe fact check this so
Yeah.
I don't look like an idiot.
So there are lots of we won't get into the specifics of how, like, what specific missionary work happened in Britain to bring Christianity to the I'm avoiding the term Anglo-Saxon because we've done so much work in this episode already to deconstruct that word.
We just call them the pagans.
Yeah, the pagan people of Britain. We know that there was a lot of missionary work that was done. We're not going to get into that, but I think what is important to understand about the Christianization of Britain, round 2, is how it intersected with the rise of political authority, which is what it did. Basically, what does Christianity do for kings?
And the idea is that Christianization, in this case, is incredibly top-down. Mm-hmm. If you're a petty king, you're in this sort of like political and military conflict with other petty kingdoms. You're looking for an advantage. What's a great advantage you can get? Better connections with the continent. Mm-hmm. How do you get involved with the rest of the continent? Well, you become Christian.
Yeah.
Which makes it very eager to say, hey, invite these like guys with stupid haircuts to come over and shout at my villagers.
Yeah.
So then I can be integrated into this larger Christian world, which both brings with it prestige and forms of prestige, such as you can connect the rise of coinage again with the rise of Christianity.
Oh yeah, the British stopped minting coins for a bit.
Yeah, they once again reject the old
They
advanced
rev-turn.
culture. Yeah,
We don't need coins on the commune.
Yeah, and then
I'm gonna be the master of the mint.
and so the quote unquote Anglo-Saxons
I'm gonna
do.
be the guy that files the edges off the coins.
I'm gonna be the guy who clips coins in the commune.
Christianization does a second useful thing for kings, which is that it brings more people into your kingdom who know how to read. No, genuinely, this is important.
No.
Because actually, even a very low-level state needs a basic level of administration, which a bunch of hairy guys with axes cannot provide to you and are not interested in providing to you.
And it also provides an ideology that
Yes.
backs up your ideas of kingship.
Yeah.
Like, as the king, as a Christian king, you're responsible for your people's Christianity, but also that makes them sort of responsible to you. Your authority is more ordained if you can keep everyone in line. Like a Christian kingdom is a well-run kingdom. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a very useful ideology for these guys.
Yeah.
And but that's not the only thing that we saw changes in, because obviously there's this previously mentioned
Anglicization.
What?
Anglicization.
Saxonization.
There we go. Let's say that.
The sort of Saxonization of culture, and again, there's arguments to be made that this is a top-down process where like the Saxons and like some Saxons and some Angles do quite well in this early FA Cup period.
In the preliminary rounds.
In the preliminary rounds.
Before the Premier League teams get involved.
Which causes a lot of, like, sort of lower tier guys to think, well, they're doing very well. There's a lot of prestige in saying having this heritage from North Germany. Why don't I have a little bit of it myself?
You know, I think my mother's aunt was half North German.
Yeah. And we are dealing with a vaguely apocryphal story because we are quoting Bede here.
Boo.
But the first king of Wessex, the first king of the West Saxon was named Cerdic, which is an incredibly Brittonic name.
So it sounds like a guy who you would meet in like Aberystwyth down the pub.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
My name is Cerdic Williams.
I go out fishing on my ship. I catch cod in place.
Yeah. And I'm deeply German.
And I come from the continent.
I'm proper German, so I am.
I'm just like all those other hard lads.
My name's Cerdic. I'm German, and I'm sorry that I hit you. I was only following orders.
Wait, Rin, put that carnix away. They don't need to see that.
And that is one argument to me made. The other argument is that a small Anglo-Saxon elite moved over early and basically had a sort of top-down imposition where everyone else was kind of poor, and they took over these economic centres, and then from that point sort of like leveraged that economic power by having a very, it wasn't like there were hundreds of thousands of Saxons coming over, although that, because there was all this broad migration, but like they got in good, they bought low, and they sold high. No, they conquered high, and then they sold to the low people. You live on the big hill, you know, that it sits by all the trade routes. You can be like, now you speak my language.
Yeah. What is Brittonic? I don't speak that. This is America, speak English.
You want to have
I'm barely joking.
you want to have my prestigious goods, you have to speak my language.
This is a coin. You don't know what it is yet.
But your kids are gonna love it.
This is a cross, a coin, and a sword.
My three favorite things.
And I'm gonna hit you with all three.
Take off that flower crown. We need to go back.
Stop painting yourself green.
Yeah, exactly.
But I already know about Jesus. We've had Jesus for hundreds of years.
You don't have anything to do with the Basque. Get the hell out of here.
What?
Yeah, that disproven Celtic connection.
Oh, yeah, true.
Let's not get into the Basque.
I love the people who are like, they were actually Neanderthals. I'm like, what?
What, like Franco? Average Madrid opinion of like...
In the Basque language, the reason it is so ugly and so disgusting, it is because they are descended from the Neanderthals. This is why they look like this and they eat disgusting fish.
To recapitulate, around like the end of the 7th century AD, I think we can say Christianization is mostly complete in Britain. Most people are Christian. Basically actually in Britain, I don't know, most people in like what's now known as England are Christian. Most of them speak some sort of Germanic language or dialect. There are still people in what's now known as Wales and Cornwall and Scotland and in, the areas that are sort of near the borders of these places, so parts of the country that are still in modern-day England that don't speak these languages yet, but the kind of expansion of Germanic languages and culture has also mostly subsumed England as we know it today. That's not to say that the country is politically unified. It's not. There are different kingdoms, different warlords. There is still this kind of state of flux. The bracket is still underway. Most of the lower seeds have been eliminated.
Yeah.
But
Now it's 5 petty kings trapped in a dome.
yeah, exactly.
The dome is Britain.
Alfred coming in off the top rope with a folding chair.
Hell in the cell.
Yeah, so this, I mean,
We trapped 5 petty kings in a big cage, which is called Britain.
it does feel that way sometimes. Oh, man.
No, we can't have this level of pathos. Yeah.
Sorry, I was
you had
reading Ice tweets before you got here, and I got really angry.
That's why we had to do nostalgia to cheer him up.
Remember
Yeah.
when we were children and we were all silly?
Yeah.
So by the end of this is a long and drawn-out, complicated process, this consolidation, homogenization, and Christianization of Britain. It would be fiendishly complicated even if we could rely on the sources, which we can't. But what I think we need to bear in mind is that by the 9th century, you have a almost entirely Christian Britain that is, with the exception of what is now Scotland and Wales and Cornwall, is divided into 4 kingdoms. Like, from the 9th century onwards, there are basically 4 kingdoms that you need to kind of keep track of in Anglo-Saxon, quote-unquote, England, which is, number 1, Joe's homeland of Northumbria. Woo! This is a large kingdom that encompasses pretty much all of what is now the north of England, plus a little bit of Scotland. It goes up, it goes from the Wash, which is the great sort of estuary between Lincolnshire and Yorkshire, and it goes all the way up to the Firth of Forth, which divides Fife from Lothian in Scotland. Moving southwards, we have Mercia, which is, from time to time, has been the sort of the dominant power in England, but by the 9th century, really kind of
They're
isn't.
washed.
Yeah, they are
ain't got
washed.
anymore. They built one big
Yeah,
fortification
they
across Wales.
built one dike,
Yeah.
and they were like, well, that was too much work.
I'm tired now.
Yeah, I'm going home. So that's basically the English Midlands. So places like
Snottingham.
Snottingham, Lincolnshire, Warwickshire, Oh, sorry. Naming counties is not going to be helpful. I forgot. It's basically the middle bit of England. And then going southwards, the south of England is divided into 2. You have what is now kind of the home counties area of England, and sort of the area sort of west of that is Wessex, the kingdom of the West Saxons, and east of that is East Anglia, which is a sort of coastal kingdom that encompasses, what is now Norfolk, Suffolk, bits of Cambridgeshire and Essex.
The Cornish are holding out on the peninsula of Cornwall. The Welsh are about.
Yeah, interesting Cornish things are happening at this point, but we can't get into that.
Undisclosed Cornish occasions.
And one thing I wanted to mention is that, we talked about the sort of Saxon or Germanic identity sort of quickly becoming quite dominant in Britain, but I think it's also worth pointing out that the people who arrive in Britain and settle and form these kingdoms also quite quickly sort of take to, or sort of develop an identity, if not as all being part of one people, as, being people who inhabit the land that they inhabit. They don't necessarily retain a strong sort of ethnic identity based on where they come from. And we see a lot of evidence of that in, place names in Britain. So we do have a few place names that refer to their original homelands on the continent, Anglia, or Sussex or whatever, referring to the Saxons. But we also get, I would say, a much larger number of place names that refer to or names of people or tribes or groups of people that refer to the Brittonic or Latin names of where they come from. So, for instance, the names of counties like Kent.
And this is why the term Anglo-Saxon is contentious, because it's one that basically wipes out a lot of regional differences.
Yeah.
Between, at the end of the day, like we said, there is this sort of homogenization towards a more Germanic language and a way of material culture, but, if you're in Kent, you don't have a lot in common with Northumbrians. Not today. And, if you're...
When you're basically the same.
Yeah, you can't say, oh, well, you're a Saxon or you're an Angle or a Jute.
Yeah.
And you live hundreds of miles apart. What kind of kinship do you have at
You
all?
might not even understand each other.
Yeah, no, there's various dialects being spoken here.
And I think it is also not a good idea to understate the existence of specific Germanic traditions and cultural aspects that have also been brought over. So even though, again, there's a lot of different types of people, different sort of dialects, and different affiliations, there is still, I would say, a lot that they share with each other. You know, there's the poetic traditions, the oral traditions that then get turned into literary traditions when Irish monks teach them how to write again in the 600s, and so on. There's like the specific legal systems that they have in common with a lot of other Germanic people.
In the early medieval period, being part of a nations of people means something dramatically different from what it means to us in the modern day. Mm-hmm. Like, we have these very strong borders, and we of like what nation people come from, what it means to be a certain ethnicity, to be from a certain culture. Whereas in the early medieval period, things are a lot more permeable, and like what it means to be, say, an Anglo or a Saxon, like there's dividing lines between them, but you could also maybe move between the two a lot more easily. It's not about being born in a certain place or like even practicing certain aspects, but like if you maybe pay fealty to someone, you might become an Anglo all of a sudden if you're like living with them and are like integrated in that manner. Like it's a concept of nationhood that is very different from the one we experience today. So there's simultaneously this cultural overlap, and then they do have this, at the same time, this feeling of division between them, you know?
And I think crucially, even though there is, on an individual level, for rulers and people in power, an incentive to consolidate and defend their lands and their people and their assets, there is not yet necessarily much incentive to sort of, for people to develop a group identity, especially not a sort of identity that might span from coast to coast across this misty sort of wretched isle that they inhabit. And so there isn't yet really, I would say, despite there being sort of internal pressures and a lot of internal divisions within Britain, there's not necessarily any external pressure that is causing these people to think of themselves all as one people.
Yeah. And even though I can sense the incredibly transparent transition that you're about to make, I do want to say people are already typing, but what about Bede writing something called the Ecclesiastical History of the English People? Don't worry, we're going to get to that. You may be surprised.
It turns out sometimes you can be a weird nerd and have ideas about, like, the people who you live with who, like, if you turned up and told guys you're English, they'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about,
Well, that's
bro?
the entire history of, like, 19th century nation building.
Yeah.
A bunch of cloistered academics who spend too much time reading poetry, realizing, wait a minute, we all speak the same language. That means we're basically the same. And then you go to, like, I mean, there's the classic example of, going during the Greek Revolution, showing up in like some island like Crete or whatever, and just being like, and what you guys are Greek, right? And they're like, no, we're Romans. What are you talking about?
Sequestering yourself in the lab and inventing Yorkshire pudding and spotted dick and being like, this is true English.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I think for most people, probably the big question was like,
am I going to fucking die this winter?
For breakfast today.
I need to do some blood feuding and also eat oats.
Yeah, I have a court appearance at 4 to swear an oath. Then I need to go eat oats at 5.
That's what they call it. It's what they call an O&O day. Oats and oats.
Oats and oats. Oats and oats, my new podcast.
Are you listening to the new podcast, Triple O?
Wait, no, that's Anglo-Saxon Guy Fieri.
Everybody, it's me, Anglo-Saxon Guy Fieri.
Okay, shag, marry, kill.
Okay.
Oops.
I'm here on the road, Watling Street, the only fucking road we have.
We forgot what paving stones were.
Yeah. Okay, anyway. so, but like you say, Olivia, the Anglo-Saxon-ish people are lacking a sort of external shock to the system that might lead them to identify themselves as belonging to some community that unifies them. I wonder if such a shock to the system will present itself.
Hurdy-gurdy.
Hurdy-gurdy. That was a distant hurdy.
So, in the year 793, everybody's favorite proto-pirates arrive. The Vikings.
Would you be interested in fat pack furniture?
And now I have to stress when I say
I'm gonna turn your children into meatballs.
that is slander. So, I mean, when we say that the Vikings arrived in 793, I do just want to problematize that a little bit. Like, they knew that there were Scandinavian traders arriving in Britain for decades and centuries before 793. What changes in 793 is how they behave.
Yeah, they're going a Viking.
Yeah. Well, no, they do.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to read an excerpt actually from, this is a 12th century source, so much, much later than the events that are being described, but this is from Simeon of Durham in his one of his history writings, and I think it's very evocative and at least descriptive of like how this sort of event went down in the national sort of mythos and memory. And so he writes, in the year AD 793, the pagans from the northern regions came with a naval force to Britain like stinging hornets, and spread on all sides like fearful wolves, robbed, tore, and slaughtered not only beasts of burden, sheep, and oxen, but even priests and deacons, companies of monks and nuns. And they came to the church of Lindisfarne, laid everything waste with grievous plundering, trampled the holy places with polluted steps, dug up the altars, and seized all the treasures of the holy church. They killed some of the brothers, took some away with them in fetters, many they drove out, naked and loaded with insults, some they drowned in the sea.
Sort of like a Viking fuck, marry, kill.
What do you mean I can't do all of them?
Fetter, drown, drive.
Driven into the sea. Yeah. I think it's also quite beautiful because it's got echoes of, this is like a throwback to an earlier episode, but the like plea for help from the Britons.
Yeah.
When they're writing to the continent during like the Anglo-Saxon arrivals, when they're saying like, we're stuck between all these scary Germanic people in the sea and we're not sure which is worse.
Well, this is an incredibly important point, I think, because a lot of the very early medieval historiography, as in historiography being written in the Middle Ages, about the Anglo-Saxon arrival in Britain is being written during the period of Viking raiding. And I am stealing words out of Joe Mason's mouth here, but there is it is quite possible that they are, when English writers later on are writing about their quote-unquote ancestors' arrival in Britain, what they are actually doing is back-projecting their own experiences of a bunch of terrifying pagan German men sort of washing up on their shores and ruining everything.
Absolutely disgusting recontextualizing history for your own, like, shit that's going on in your own time.
This never happens.
Exactly.
Wouldn't be me.
Yeah, this has never happened in the history of historiography ever.
Anyway, Howard Harada was bussing for real.
He was goated with the sauce.
Oh, he was a PogChamp for sure.
Wait, I don't know who that is. That's the later episode. No. We can't talk about him.
Despite there being internal tensions we've already described in Britain, there's certain things that they have culturally in common with each other, all of these people living in Britain. Christianity is a big one, and with the territory of Christianity comes, like, you know, we won't shake down monasteries and, like, murder the inhabitants and cart off all of, like, the altars and the jewels and the goods.
I mean, sometimes they do, but mostly they don't.
Mostly they don't. Mostly there's an understanding that if you build, like, an abbey on an island on the east coast of Britain and you put loads of monks and gold there, they're gonna be fine. You can leave them. You can leave them over the winter, and they'll all be there when you come back for the most part. The arrival of Scandinavians changes this fact drastically.
So, social trust has dramatically increased, decreased with the arrival of the Vikings.
I mean,
you can't leave your door unlocked anymore because of these bloody Vikings.
Exactly.
The Scandinavians have spent the last, 300 years getting really scary and do not share your cultural values or assumptions.
They're all wearing eyeshadow.
Yeah, exactly.
They have cool beards.
Yeah.
Yeah. They've got they have their training montage of
being depressed,
starving to death, experiencing the closest thing that Europe has ever seen to a genuine apocalypse.
Then they hit the rowing machines
called boats.
Meanwhile, as if you watch modern TV shows shows and media about the Anglo-Saxons. They've just sort of been getting flabby and
Yeah.
Yeah,
pathetic.
exactly.
You know, they all like dress in stupid clothes and like are primed to be beaten up by huge Nordic men.
No, exactly.
They're putting their things together and being like, "Ooh, I hope like a huge man doesn't turn up and knock me around."
Wait, every time there's a
Enough
legal-
about your
Yeah, I'll
fan
shut it right
fiction.
now. Cut that out. That's not going public.
That's all staying in.
I mean, if you're an incredibly skilled seafaring like group of people who is up to rob monasteries,
Yeah.
it's like wandering into a fucking supermarket.
Exactly. It's like wandering into like
You're
an
like
orchard.
You're
An
like
apple orchard.
you're like Yeltsin.
I'm the top scrumper
Exactly.
of Norway, and I've walked into this English orchard.
Oh, nice apples. It'd be a shame if someone scrumped them. Yeah. So, you know, and at first these are opportunistic plunderings of islands, then it starts to be opportunistic plunderings of the mainland, and then the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle records that in 851 AD, a group of so-called heathens, for the first time, do something a bit unprecedented. They spend the winter in Kent. And so this marks the beginning of a significant trend in England, which is that these Norse settlers or Norse invaders will start showing up with the hopes of maybe setting up shop for a bit, maybe staying for a little while.
Having spent a winter in Kent, I don't know what they were thinking.
It is
Have you spent
really
a
like-
winter in Norway?
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
It is really interesting, I think, like the dichotomy of the Roman sources kind of saying like, well, we got out of there as quickly as possible, obviously, because it was miserable. And like the Scandinavians being like, okay,
greatest society
this is the greatest society.
What do you mean that the ground isn't exclusively volcanic rock? What do you mean that the growing season is more than 6 weeks?
I truly only think that like Jerusalem could have been written by a Danish guy writing
Yeah.
the city on a hill that isn't exploding.
And so we see sort of repeated encroachments, especially throughout the north and the east of England in the following decade or so. And in 865 AD, loads of Vikings show up, more than ever have before. And these guys are coming with the hopes of maybe sort of staking a permanent claim on the land. And in particular, they're led by two men named Ivar the Boneless and Halfdan Ragnarsson. And so at this point, a lot of our sources about these guys and who they are come from the Norse sagas, which, for the same reasons as every other source we've discussed so far, are not necessarily completely reliable.
Also, they have loads of magical bullshit in them.
Yes,
People are
exactly.
constantly like casting spells and shit.
Ragnar Lodbrok was 100% some guy's OC.
Yeah, he had one gray eye and
Yeah.
one blue eye.
And he's got special heavy clothes.
Yeah.
that
He's
help
like
fight
Cold
everyone
Steel
better.
the Hedgehog.
Exactly.
And he has like 200 kids who go on to conquer all the world.
And also,
No,
every
exactly.
protagonist of a Norse saga is 7 feet tall.
Yeah.
In a time when everybody in Scandinavia is ludicrously malnourished. I know the
exactly.
stereotype of like, oh, the fucking Scandinavians are all giant and like they're all statuesque, beautiful blondes. But like those people have access to like potatoes and like red meat
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
a regular basis.
Revolutionary invention.
Exactly. We were talking about guys that are being fed purely on fermented cod and probably like actual kelp.
Oh, so the Icelanders. Boom, 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 boom.
And anyways, so the sagas claim that these two guys are brothers and both sons of the legendary king Ragnar Lodbrok of Denmark and Sweden. This is possibly not true. The sagas also say that the reason why they're coming is to avenge their father because he was thrown into a pit of snakes by the Northumbrian king. I think that's like a very generous motivation to ascribe to them. I think probably they were looking for land and resources. But either way, they came with the intention of conquering.
This episode of Weird Medieval Guys is brought to you by Harry's. I've been using Harry's for a couple of months now, and I found that I no longer have to face Northerners disputing my rule of England. Ever since I started harrying, hundreds of thousands have died, and I am confidently the King of England. I have a newfound confidence. I'm happy to go out, build new cathedrals, and really establish my power over England. So when you think about harrying, think about Harry's.
So Ragnar Lodbrok, do you guys know what this name translates to?
It's like hairy shirt.
It's hairy trousers, actually.
Well, I'm an idiot.
Yeah, exactly. Egg on your face.
Egg on my trousers.
Exactly.
My hairy trousers.
It's so hard to wash out.
Yeah, so the saga that he's in mentions that he's called this because he made himself a special set of clothing out of hairy hides, which he, quote, boiled in pitch, drew through sand, and then dried and hardened in the sun. He does this so he can kill a giant snake that's guarding the woman who he wants to get with.
Like I said, magical bullshit.
And the saga says that his son, Ivar the Boneless, is so called because he was born without any bones in his body.
Ivar the Puddle.
Modern scholarship has suggested that this may not have been possible.
What's modern scholarship's theory on it?
So-called doctors have said that I can't live without any bones in my body.
And yet,
I'm about to go and undergo debonification surgery to prove them wrong.
Modern scholarship has suggested that he may have been impotent. Which is arguably worse.
I don't know if that's true.
No, it's not true.
No.
I just wanted to give people...
'Cause I feel like if he was
people who are born with no bones, I wanted to throw them a bone.
Give them a oh, boo.
That is actually more offensive.
Offensive to the people who are born
with no bone.
You're gonna be
the community of people who are born without bones.
I'm not confident enough. That's not a real thing.
The skeletonly disadvantaged among us.
I gotta quickly Google.
When you laugh at Ivor the Boneless, he doesn't hear you. Ivor the Boneless, he can't hear you, but all your friends who are boneless.
You
Exactly.
be born with no bones. AI. Yes, it's possible to be born with severe bone deficiencies.
That's
bones
different.
that are so fragile they essentially disappear.
Yeah.
So go fuck yourself. New drug gives growth to girl born with no bones.
Weird medieval guys.
USA Today. This is all getting cut. This is horrific.
Weird medieval guys would like to apologise for a
Born
mockery
with a rare condition, little
the
girl has to grow
boneless.
new bones. Child born without bones.
No, but they still have bones. It's just that they have
Experimental
less...
therapy saves child born without bones.
No, but that's in brackets.
Newborn with no bones.
I can't believe you said you had to lock it.
Child without bones begins to develop skeletal frame.
Oh my god. Right, okay, lock in.
This is all getting.
They all had cool names.
Lock in, guys, stop! I need to lock in.
Halfdan White Shirt, Sigurd Snake in the Eye,
Yes.
Ivar the Boneless, the other guy. It's like the stranger.
Yeah. Anyways. Either way, details be damned. We know that Ivar and Halfdan lead their army on a bloody rampage through England, taking advantage of some political instability going on in Northumbria to seize Northumbria, and they capture Aela, the king who allegedly killed their so-called supposed father, who may or may not have existed, and they kill him. And so...
They don't just kill him, they make him a thing that may or may not have existed, a blood eagle, right?
They take out all his bones.
Yeah, they stole his bones and tried to give him to
Ivar. They tried to stick the bones in him.
No, I swear they say they make a blood eagle of the King of Northumbria.
I don't remember that. It's definitely possible. Let me Google.
Yeah, let's double check that.
Oh, yeah. So the Norse sources claim that he was blood eagled. The Anglo-Saxon accounts say he died gloriously in battle.
Yeah, mate. He went out big.
Yeah, no.
He definitely didn't have his lungs torn through his rib cage. Oh, he wasn't killed in a way that may or may not have existed. By some guys who were born to a may or may not existing father.
Yeah.
The way that he was killed, not only did the way that he was killed exist, but it's also how they killed him. FYI.
Anyway, so the Great Heathen Army, as the Anglo-Saxon sources refer to it, sort of rampages down through Britain and essentially just like lops off one kingdom after another until there's basically only one left. Wessex.
I mean, like, the Vikings are like, God, we've started winning really early in this story. You know, we've rolled up everything, and now there's only a single kingdom left that we've really driven into the corner.
Yeah.
The rules of narrative mean that we have this in the bag.
Yeah. So one of the only English leaders, and arguably the most powerful English leader, who is left after quite a bit of warfare between the Norse invaders and the people living in England, is Alfred, the King of Wessex.
Yes, so Alfred is an interesting guy. He certainly was like... He seems to have suffered from chronic disease throughout his entire life, which makes kind of what he accomplished even more impressive. There is another thing that he suffered from throughout his entire life. Would you like to guess what it is?
Being a huge nerd?
No, being irrepressibly, excruciatingly horny.
Being a huge nerd.
He spent many years praying, please can I be less horny? And God was like, no.
Wow, the anti-Edward.
Yes, truly.
Is what he possibly had a clerical education? Shit.
I didn't research that.
I shouldn't have. I read it
We
in
still
passing.
have 200 years.
So many Saxons.
Yeah. So he's a chronically ill, ludicrously horny young man, and by the late 870s, he is backed into a corner, wandering through the sort of the fens of southwest
He
England.
loses a big battle.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is, these Anglo-Saxons, as we'll call them, the people living in England, they're not united. And so he has sporadic help from the other kingdoms, but he is fighting, he's fighting a very difficult battle against these Vikings. So he has some major victories, and he also has some major losses against them.
And after a particular loss, he finds himself wandering through some swamps.
Yes. Called Somerset. Where he has a disastrous Great British Bake Off experience.
And I just think it's a beautiful story because it's just Alfred kind of wandering through the swamps, and he comes upon this, like house where this woman is making some cakes, and he's like so busted and fucked up looking at this point that like nobody knows who he is. Like, he doesn't look regal. He's washed, exactly. He's cooked.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, he's in his flop era. And
NPC mode for real.
no, exactly. He's not the Pog champ. If anything, he's like the Pog loser.
We understand youth culture.
Exactly. Anyways, and so this woman, not recognizing him as the king, lets him come in, but she says, okay, you have to watch my cakes while I'm cooking, and I'm gonna go, like, milk the cows or whatever, slop out the pig pen, I don't know. And so she goes and does this, and he's so exhausted from all of the stuff he's had to deal with leading the English against the Vikings that he falls asleep and the cakes burn. She comes back in after some time and notices the cakes are burned and has a go at him. And that's the end of the story. That's it. That's the whole story.
It's not like
There's
Robert Bruce and the Spider, where it's like, I've
that's
learned a moral lesson.
I thought it was going to be like that. It turns out it's just not.
Meanwhile, in the next cave over, Robert the Bruce is looking at a spider.
Wow, this spider is literally me. Because the movie Drive hadn't been invented yet.
Yep.
So, after the inspiring story of burning some cakes and learning no lessons from it, Alfred manages to halt Viking expansion at the Battle of Edington in 878, where he defeats the army of Guthrum, the Viking king of East Anglia. And following the battle, Guthrum agrees to be baptized, which, from his point of view, legitimizes his conquest of East Anglia, in exchange for his army leaving Wessex. Now, the kings then agreed a second, more important treaty, which defined the boundary of Wessex and Viking territory. Now, this, incredibly importantly, partitions the kingdom of Mercia in two ways. So essentially, the West Saxons absorb the West Midlands, and the Vikings, who are not a coherent kingdom, it's just more of a sort of constellation of local warlords, absorb the East Midlands.
Yeah, so this is, and I think it's really important to touch on the fact that they're not really like one group of people.
No.
Because Alfred strikes a deal with one Viking leader saying, well, okay, you can have like most of the territory you've claimed so far, but like, don't take the piss, like no further, mate.
Yeah.
And that's basically, what they shake hands on. But this is, again, like a deal between two people. I would say it's hardly a deal between like two nations.
There are at least 5, depending on how you count them, 5 different Viking polities in England at this point. This is one of them.
And at this point, I think it's important to say, like, the sort of looming threat, the thing that is on all of the English people's minds, all of the people in the various English kingdoms, is this threat from the Vikings, because these people are not Christians, so they have, like, very little obligation to conduct warfare in accordance with the kind of Christian normative, like, value system that the English are now used to. They arrive on boats in massive numbers. People don't know like how many of them there are. Oftentimes, if you beat them back, they will retreat and then return suddenly with like more people and more ships. And this is something that at this point has been going on for about 100 years. And so like the English people are getting quite sort of tired of this constant warfare. They themselves do not have standing armies. It's quite difficult for them to be in this constant state of, being on guard, especially with the existence of different kingdoms in England, all of whom are responsible for their own sort of protection. And often they will, like, send the Vikings to a different kingdom. Like, they'll say, oh, we'll pay you £500 to, like, go raid the other guys instead. And it'll work for, like, 6 months, and then the Vikings will come back and they'll have to do it all over again. So it's kind of like, in every instance, everyone in England is losing.
And post-Eddington, if I'm an Angle in Mercia, who's just had his sort of petty kingdom partitioned, and all of a sudden I find myself under the kingship of a West Saxon, you might not be particularly happy about it.
No.
Like, even if, as some sources claim, like, Mercians sided with the Vikings, the Danish, the Northmen, against... to fight against Alfred during that battle, you might be like, well, okay, why should I listen to this guy?
Yeah.
So what do we have in common? Which is when Alfred the Great, who was known to have like sort of scholarly tendencies, possibly had a clerical education, so he's reading all these sort of these guys like Bede, presumably, and is like swamped in this milieu, comes up with a nice little word that is
Anglican, or as we might translate it more directly, English.
Anglican.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Anglican. He invents the Anglican Church.
Yes.
Which is crazy.
So Alfred starts experimenting with a new title, which is King of the English. So there are a few sort of surviving coins from before, the 880s that use that title to refer to him. But really from 882 onwards, it's just the King of Wessex is completely supplanted in official kind of propaganda as King of the English. And he seems to have seriously engaged with pretty shockingly modern style nation building to kind of legitimize his conquest. Because remember, he's just absorbed half of this somewhat foreign people and needs to kind of justify it. So he, for example, sponsored the translation of a lot of different ecclesiastical texts into Old English, or the West Saxon dialect of Old English, including Bede's Ecclesiastical History of the English People. But he does something very clever in his translation of Bede's Ecclesiastical History, where he supplants the use of the term Anglo-Saxon with this word Anglican, which means English. It has connotations of not being a hybrid, but of being a singular, united nation.
And he's very confidently king of the West Saxon, but all of a sudden he has all these Angles.
Yeah.
So putting Angle front and centre in this sort of court propaganda, there's a pretty clear use case here of what he's doing.
He's basically saying that the English, the Germanic people of Britain that we have been nebulously calling, and slightly anachronistically calling the Anglo-Saxons, are a natural political community.
Yeah, they are kin.
Yes.
Is the key word there, and they are all connected through Christianity,
Yeah.
which he does a big job of promoting as well.
And language.
To conquer England, first you have to invent it.
Alfred doesn't just create the sort of vague concept of England as a political community, he also takes major steps towards making England real, which obviously was a horrible mistake and has been regretted ever since, but is important for us to understand. So he does a couple of things with this kind of new emergent English kingdom that are really interesting and worth talking about. The first of these was creating a new system of public defense, because as we've talked about just now, England up till this point does not have standing armies, and it doesn't really have a coordinated kind of system of defending itself in the way that, for example, the Roman Empire did. So a lot of English towns, like London, York, and Nottingham, had walls that people could flee behind, but they were poorly defended, and so Viking raiders could just kind of like run over them, essentially, and seize the cities for themselves. So Alfred's big defensive innovation was creating a new network of properly defended fortifications, which is a plan outlined in something called the Burgh Hidage. These are essentially across Wessex and Western Mercia, or is it Western Mercia, he engaged on this massive kind of infrastructure program to repair existing fortifications, bring old Roman garrisons back into use, and even essentially recommission Iron Age hill forts and renovate them and press them back into service to become permanently garrisoned fortifications that each of them could defend a 15-mile radius. Now, what's interesting about the Burgh Hidage and the system of what's called boroughs is how systematic it is. So the boroughs are densely and evenly spread, and the Burgh Hidage even includes a formula for calculating the tax revenue that's allocated to each borough based on the number of men that will be needed to defend an acre of wall.
It is also worth noting that the Hidage has been accused of massively over-evaluating the amount of hides produced by Wessex in a sort of flex on the rest of England, where Alfred's like, yeah, we're fucking balling, mate.
Yeah.
We got the cash.
Yeah.
But it also gives us a hard number for the number of men who are needed to defend this, which is 27,000 men, that is a ludicrously enormous number of citizen soldiers. In an era when that is just not the case in Western Europe. You do not have standing armies of that scale. And one of the interesting things is no historian has really conclusively proved how he was able to effect this kind of mobilization. I think the answer is probably that there was some fudging of numbers to make it sound more impressive than it was. But even if you account for that, I think what is clear is that there's a sense of ambition and state building here that we haven't seen since the Roman period. There is something, I hate to use the word, but more modern than what we're used to, which is just like, come get the 10 biggest men in your village to beat up the 10 biggest men in the next village.
10 years into being English, there's 27,000 hard-nosed geezers ready to throw down.
No, exactly. We do have quite well-documented evidence of this. I mean, it specifically says, for the establishment of 1 acre's breadth of wall, and for its defense, 16 hides are required. So a hide is 1 household. So we're talking about like not that much wall requires 16 households to sort of establish it, or the land and like revenue of 16 households. And so if each hide, i.e. household, is represented by 1 man, then it's kind of giving us like, a formula for both like how many people we need to garrison the wall, but also like the amount of taxes that we need to levy and so on. And so I think it's also, more modern in that sense, in that it's kind of looking at like what resources can we extract from people, and like that constitutes then a civic duty that these people have, as part of like their obligation to the greater good, to pay for these defenses, because it will benefit everyone in the end. And some people will be called upon to actually defend this wall with their flesh and blood, some people will be called upon simply to pay for this wall with like their goods and the revenues of their households. And there might also be a kind of unevenness in who's expected to die versus who's expected to just pay money.
Absolutely.
It's always a sign of like the complexity of any sort of states when you start taking censuses and being like, well, we need to get people to start paying for stuff.
Yeah. We need as you start applying hard numbers to these things.
Yeah.
And I think it's, important to note at this point that, like, even though they have, for instance, documents and literacy in the Anglo-Saxon state, and I would go so far as to say that the English state at this point is pretty sophisticated compared to other states in Europe. It's still not really a system that's based on, like, traditional record keeping. It's still not a system that has a great deal of sort of reach. It's very difficult, even in a small country like England, to reach people in all parts of the kingdom as the king. Simply, like, enforcing the law, a central law, is very difficult at this point. And so naturally things are quite decentralized. And so you see as well kind of a very clear give and take relationship between the king and the local, both like church leaders and, as well like the local nobles. So for instance, enforcing like the extraction of these taxes as the king could be quite difficult. But if, for instance, a bishop were to assist you in helping enforce the law in their sort of domain, then they would receive half of the rights belonging to the king for the, for instance, legal fines. They would receive essentially like a cut of every single tax and fine that was extracted from the people in that city. So basically, like, in exchange for enforcing the law, you're sort of being given a cut of the revenue for doing so. So if someone, has a scrap, kills a cow, has to pay a fine, then you get a little bit off the top just for sort of enforcing the law.
And as a state on the European periphery, you can save a lot of time not engaging in the classic pastime of early medieval kings of fighting with the Pope
Yeah, exactly.
on everything.
Yeah.
The Pope actually, factors in, like, very little comparatively in these cases.
Well, he will appear later in the story.
Well, yeah.
You can see his evil hand reaching over.
The Pope is off screen. Just bear that in mind.
Fighting with
The
Ottonian kings.
Pope is like the shark in Jaws. He's always present, even when not pictured.
There's always ominous organ music playing in the
Yeah.
background.
Well, look at my deeply developed and centralized state.
No, yeah. But yeah,
Something happened to
what I'm
that.
getting at here is that, like, even though there is a sort of central, like, legal system and central policy
Yeah.
being enforced by the king, it's very much reliant on cooperation from the nobles and the church officials.
And a major way in which you see that that sort of grand bargain institutionalized and operationalized is in an institution called the Wittengemot.
Yes.
Now, this is about to get very woolly and very complicated because this is very contentious. We're going to give you the classical kind of interpretation of what this is, and then we're going to talk about maybe some ways in which that is not true. So, the classic understanding of the Anglo-Saxon kings, as in the pre-1066 kings, is that they are elected by a body called the Wittengemot, or this is basically like the Assembly of Wise Men, which is all the magnates of the kingdom, both secular and religious, who get together to elect a king. Now, how institutionalized this was this? Did they have regular proceedings? Were the elections legitimately competitive? We truly do not know, because the sources that we have give us basically sweet fuck all, and it is telling, I think, that for like the 100 years between Alfred and events that will happen in 1016 that we will get to, they consistently elect the members of the same family.
It is worth noting that at a similar time of this nominal idea of elective kingship is existing in England, on the continent, Charlemagne in a lot of his court propaganda, especially around his coronation, talks about being acclaimed by the nobles of Francia.
Yes.
And, like, this is often the case that, like, this is a very organized ritual that reestablishes previously existing control is you say, well, okay, I've got everybody important here who is like understands that they're here to say I'm number one. Like nobody's it'd be wrong to present it as like an actual election or an actual acclamation. There's no risk in these situations. They're actually going to say, we really love Pepin, actually. We want the Merovingians back.
No, exactly, exactly. I think it's, I think that what's particular to mention in England at this time is that this structure is very much formalized. I think that kind of...
That's the big difference.
Yeah, and I think it kind of, is in many ways... you can draw a lot of comparisons with other ways in which consensus is formalized in pre-conquest England. So, for instance, we've talked before on this podcast about the legal system in which you have a system of oaths, and the number of people who you can get to swear oaths on your behalf can play a big part in whether or not you're deemed to be guilty or innocent of a crime. And so we're not talking about something like very specific to England, before the Norman Conquest, when we talk about, these ideas of like consensus and like electiveness as playing a big part in who gets to rule, because, being a monarch has always been about gathering consensus and about ruling while keeping the balance between, your power and the power of the nobility and the ruling class. But again, I think it is very much formalized in Anglo-Saxon England in a way that you don't see in many other kingdoms, especially in this time. And I think it does lend itself to like a great deal of complexity in like the system of statehood and governance.
Yeah. Being acclaimed could be a source of legitimacy, but having like an institution that is expected to be convened as opposed to something that makes you look good to have happen to you. But it's like, no, actually you need to lend this institutional power to somebody that has like a right to exist outside like your own kingly power.
I think the important thing for me is that it institutionalizes the existing facts on the ground. The fact that central English kingship could not exist without the support of regional elites. There was this system created a method by which, that actually existing power relationship could be expressed. And so actually the question of how competitive were these elections, how institutionalized was it, is kind of second order, because I think it's more that it's not like the question of like who's going to be king never came up, because there was a single power block that was largely uncontested around Alfred and his descendants, because they were the people who won the fucking war. Like it's just power politics. And unfortunately, a lot of the time, as in modern politics, might makes right. Now, it's not total. It's not. I think we also don't want to give an impression though that like, oh, it was all totally devolved, totally decentralized. Because I think under Alfred and his successors, there is a serious attempt to impose a sense of royal control and rationalize the system of government. So one of the things that you start to see when Wessex expands is the shiring of England. Now, English counties are incredibly important culturally, I would say. It varies, like, places like Yorkshire and, I don't know, what's another county?
Worcestershire.
Who gives a shit about Worcestershire?
That's where we get the sauce from.
That's true. These are incredibly important culturally, and this is the period in which those counties arise. So Wessex before 878 already had counties, and these were named either after like a kingdom that had been absorbed into Wessex, like Kent or Sussex, but others were named, like Somerset or Dorset, were named after the main town in the region. And what you see in sort of post 878 as they expand this system of shires, where you have an ealdorman who's sort of a royal official who oversees the justice and defense of these like territorial units. So essentially the function of these counties is to like have royal officials who are responsible for administering royal justice and defense of that within a specific area. And those officials are called ealdormen, and they can be removed at the king's will, essentially. And this is a way of controlling these sort of farther flung regions. And as Wessex kind of expands northwards to absorb places like Mercia, you start to see that those kingdoms being divided up into counties themselves. Now, I would say that it was a rational system. It was more rational. So, like, some of the counties varied hugely in size. So Rutland, for example, is a county so small that Olivia walked all the way around it in an afternoon.
No, it was like 10 hours.
Okay, fair enough.
No, it was less than that. It was like maybe 8 hours with a couple tea breaks.
Okay. It's not big.
It's circumnavigable in a day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
And-
yeah, we made it to Lincolnshire by dinner time.
Well, you know what's not...
Condolences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what's not
definitely.
circumnavigable in a day,
Yorkshire.
which is
Yorkshire.
now the biggest English county, and back then was even bigger. It was like huge chunk. He's just nodding enthusiastically. So huge swathes
should be
of what is
bigger.
now Lancashire and Cumbria were all part of Yorkshire.
Did you know that in school in Yorkshire they show you a map that's called Big Yorkshire and it's just all of England?
It won't be all of England because then there wouldn't be anyone to feel better than.
Yeah, you're right. It's just the whole north.
It's just yeah.
And eventually these start being like just very kind of loose. These shires have very loose authority, but what you see over the following century is that the role of the shire gets more and more important. So, you know, by the 9th century, each shire has a royal court that's presided over by the ealdormen and the local bishop. So you have genuine administrative control being exercised.
On gentle Norman, we strike for a crown. Honoring thyself, who can refuse us? No Norman warrior would shun jeopardy.
Okay, so I think we've spent a lot of time talking about counties. This seems like a long way from Hastings in 1066, but I think the important point to note about this and the sort of the thrust of what we've been kind of saying throughout this episode is that this is an incredibly important stage in the creation of England as any kind of recognizable political unit. The idea that the English king has any meaningful control over the sort of the lands north of Wessex, that England exists in any meaningful sense beyond as like, you know, beyond a situation where like Northumbria is just a subject kingdom of Wessex. This is important because otherwise England does not exist. That's important.
Yeah, you have to have the infrastructure
Yes,
to exist. Like, it's not just nominal line by name.
exactly.
You know, you've got guys out there saying, I answer to the King of England.
Even if in practice it's like it takes like 5 days for any news to travel at all from like Northumbria to Wessex.
A lot of the time, the king says, do this, and they say no. And he says, yeah, okay then. I wanted that anyway.
But I think that the other thing that's important to note is that alongside the sort of the expansion of royal power within the territory of England, actually also at the same time, English territory is expanding. So, you know, after Alfred the Great dies in 899, you know, his son Edward leads the sort of the Reconquista of the rest of Mercia. And then Edward's son Athelstan invades the Viking kingdom of York in 927 and basically brings all of Northumbria back under English control. Now, England is suddenly this enormous kingdom that's like twice the size of the kingdom that Alfred even ruled. So the central problem that led Alfred to create the concept of English in the first place, which is that he's ruling all these people who don't really have anything to do with one another except for this vague linguistic similarity, is now 1,000 times worse, because if there's one thing we know about people from the north, they got even stronger accents.
They're even more obstinate about being better than anyone else from the south.
And I think it's also important that, like, the only reason why Athelstan was able to incorporate the North into the English kingdom is that he made a very clear accommodation of the reality of the diversity of the new kingdom. You know, it might be the kingdom of the English, but in reality, you know, you have in the very remote parts of England and in the southwest, you still have Brittonic speakers in Cornwall and Devon. And then in the north, you have a shitload of Danes and other kinds of Vikings who've just been living there quite happily for hundreds of years, or 100 years, realistically. And Athelstan actually declared that it is by my will such good laws be in place among the Danes as they best preferred. And in this context, Danes means all Scandinavians. Yeah. So what he's done here is essentially accept the fact that, yeah, some of these people are just weird Vikings. And if you look at like even just the government of somewhere like Yorkshire, like there's a reason why Yorkshire's divided into ridings and nowhere else in England is.
Yeah, I mean, this is an important fact about sort of early medieval kingship, is often you're not always kingdom of an area, you're king of a peoples.
Yes.
So you could be king of the Danes, even if you're not king of Denmark or anywhere in Sweden, Norway, like you're king of the Danish guys who live here.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fun thing about Athelstan is that he's not content with that level of political diversity, because he wants even more. He starts referring to himself in his charters as the king of all the world of Britain, which obviously includes large territories that you may notice are not parts of England. So Scotland, Wales, and the very far kind of southwest of England in the very tip of Cornwall. Sorry, go ahead.
He's got the kind of title that keeps growing and growing.
Yes, we've started with King of Wessex.
Yeah.
And then we went to King of the Anglo-Saxons.
King of the Wessex and Mercians.
Yes.
He combos them into Anglo-Saxons.
And then he's like, oh, this is too complicated, English. And now just the world of Britain.
What we three live in, I think, could be considered like the Wessex extended universe.
Yeah, the East Angles have sadly been erased.
Yeah, tragic. But the important thing about this is that there's a clear ambition there to govern in some capacity the other Celtic peoples of Britain. So we know that he demanded tribute from the various kings of Wales, because Wales isn't a kingdom at this point. It's a bear pit of just Davith ap Rhys's just slitting each other's throats constantly.
What's changed?
We love you, Wales. And he made the Britons of Cornwall, and he made them send representatives to witness his charters in these gigantic theatrical open air ceremonies, which we think were probably held in old Roman amphitheaters. This is a man with a big ego and a big sense of occasion, and he eventually invades Scotland. He eventually invades the northern kingdoms of Britain. So the Scots, who are the Gaelic peoples of sort of the north of Scotland, and then the kingdom of Strathclyde, which is a Brittonic kingdom in the southwest, and gets them to sort of come to these as well. And so Athelstan does manage to establish some kind of nominal authority over Britain as a whole.
And these rituals and key occasions are, again, a key part of early medieval kingship. You know, you don't have a incredibly extensive bureaucracy, you don't necessarily have a literati that can spread, like a lot of these nobles will be illiterate. Mm-hmm. But if you have these highly choreographed events, because they love presenting them as like, oh, I was proclaimed spontaneously, you know. Yeah. there's all this stuff where people on their own will say, God, Athelstan, you're fucking great, we love you. Whereas actually behind the scenes, everyone's like, right, everyone get in your places. This is a bit
places, people.
Yeah.
But no, and making that impression and having that be talked about is a key part of like projecting your right to be king. Yeah. And it makes an impression on everyone else that you can organise such an event.
Yes. It's the reason, I think, why we talk about uncompetitive political elections as a coronation, where it is a purely theatrical exercise to sort of affirm the legitimacy of the unquestioned ruler and show that he is unquestioned.
Yeah, the fact that you can make all these guys sort of kiss your feet indicates that even if it's fake, even if they only did it because you told them to, the fact that you can tell them all to do it is a big deal.
But I think the important distinction between what the kind of authority that Athelstan has within what is still nominally the Kingdom of England and the authority that he has in the rest of Britain is that in England, he has a network of royal officials who can kind of be make England a real thing. Whereas in Wales and in what is now Scotland, the only reason why that and political loyalty exists is because of the immediate threat of violence, which is always going to breed a lot of resentment, I think. There's no attempt to integrate the rest of Britain into the kingdom in the same way that Northumbria had been. And so this does breed resentment, and in 937, the King of Scotland and the King of Strathclyde get together, lead a combined army south of the border, and get reinforced by 600 ships from the Norse Kingdom of Dublin. We can't get into that right now. And they lead, so the combined Scottish and Brittonic and Viking army sort of rampages south until they're met probably at the Wirral by an English army, and they have what, according to our kind of written sources, is the greatest battle in the history of Britain since the fall of the Roman Empire. It's all very theatrical. There's a great poem about it, which I will read a little bit because it's been a while since we've had a good battle, I think. This is the description of the battle. 5 young kings put asleep by the sword stroke. 7 strong earls in the army of Anulf fell on the warfield, numberless numbers, shipmen and Scotsmen. Never had huger slaughter of heroes slain by the sword edge, such as old writers have writ of in histories, happed in this isle, since up from the east hither Saxon and Angle from over the broad billow broke into Britain.
Yeah, about 60 guys hitting each other in the head outside of Liverpool.
You can go watch that now. Next time Everton are playing.
It's closing time, and
but this battle is often forgotten about in the kind of narrative of the Anglo-Saxon era. But the outcome of the battle is incredibly important. So the English army basically edges it, right, and does basically win, but does so at enormous cost, as you heard in the poem. All these great heroes are falling everywhere on both sides. And the outcome of that is that Athelstan is basically neutered in his ability to exercise any control over Scotland and Strathclyde, and to a lesser extent to Wales. It's basically the end of any kind of hope of a united imperial Britain.
You can't intimidate a guy if he can punch you in the head still.
Yeah. But also the important thing is that England, despite all of her enemies ganging up on her, has still won the battle. And so, actually, England will continue to exist as a unified political entity. Yes, I know about Eric Bloodaxe. He comes in briefly. England will continue to exist as a unified political entity from this point onwards, basically uncontested. And so what we have now is finally, after this battle, we have the boundaries of England and England as a meaningful political community basically locked in. And I would say also that this process that we've been describing over this episode, where we go from the FA Cup of kingdoms to this one kingdom with one king, with one royal authority, with clearly defined boundaries with its neighbors, actually makes England one of the most sophisticated and centralized states in all of Western Europe in this period. There's nobody France certainly doesn't compare. I mean, we'll get to France in a different episode, but they're just killing each other constantly, right, as this is happening.
Would it be wrong to say that you could look at a very simplified and inaccurate map of the period and see England, and they'd draw very nice clean borders around Wales and Scotland, and obviously they're not exact.
They're permeable. They're not exact, and they're also very permeable borders. So raiding parties will continue to cross the border, but the concepts of modern day England and Wales, and to a lesser extent Scotland, because Scotland has been going through its own FA Cup of Nations at this point. They've been, essentially knocking out the Picts and sort of marginalizing Strathclyde. But my point being, like, yes, Britain suddenly at this point in the mid-10th century is politically recognizable in a way that it still is today.
Yeah, and I think even though we're still, like, a ways off, obviously, from the modern concept of a border, like, you have this idea of, you know, England and, like, the English people. And I think that's something that is very much in contrast to the previous idea or the previous sort of dynamic of people fighting over, like, you know, what bits of land were going to fall to whom or whatnot. Now it is about kind of defending this crown and this area and these people. And it is all much more, I would say, sort of cohesive, at least in, you know, the conception of the people who are sort of pulling the strings.
Meanwhile, in the continent, there's baffling states like Lotharingia kicking around.
Hey, I like
Frisians.
Lotharingia.
We like Lotharingia, yeah, we enjoy them. All right, so that is going to do us for this episode of the Weird Medieval Guys podcast. I hope you've enjoyed what has essentially been the Silmarillion to 1066. There's like weird elf gods in this. It's going off in weird tangents.
We're talking about Hengist and Horsa.
Yes. So the next episode, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of court politics in 11th century England. We're going to meet wonderful characters like Ethelred the Unready and Canute and Svein Forkbeard and other cool guys.
It's going to be an exciting time.
Yeah, it's going to be a very different tone as well, and it's going to be much shorter.
England exists now.
Yes, England exists now.
So you can follow the court around and fight about who's king.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so that will all come in the next episode, but we have to go and do whatever it is people do in Norwich.
All right.
That's right, this entire episode was recorded in one session in Norwich.
No
Norwich.
editing involved. Uncut.
As always, if you love what we do and you want to share some appreciation for us, then you should give us a 5-star review on your podcast listening platform, or come to our door and give us a kiss on the mouth.
Or, alternatively, and less sort of threatening to me, you can leave a Spotify comment and Olivia might read one out.
Yes, exactly. Or you can fold a paper crane and tuck it into the stonework at Norwich Castle with your message written upon it, at which point it will be transmogrified into a message directly into our brains.
I will read any messages left in my bed case pillows. My pillowcases. Fucking.
My bed case pillows. Spotify comment from Caitlin who says, every time Aaron says don't at me, I have to repress the incredibly strong urge to... What are you doing? He just keeps flicking switches ineffectually.
Second update. My fuses are broken.
Wait, the computer is charging.
Caitlin who says, every time Aaron says don't at me, I have to repress the incredibly strong urge to at him just for funsies. Alright, we have a situation to deal with, so we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Guys, this ciabatta's never getting cut.
Oh.
No! We're going to starve to death.
I'm actually kind of worried.
Alright, everybody, bye!
We bought expensive microphones and they blew out my couch.
Don't connect it to my
We didn't
laptop.
buy shit! This microphone arrived in my house unbidden.